Today we are going to talk about Aboriginals, the original Australian population. Aboriginals had a very different way of life before the British came along and invaded Australia and made it a convict territory. They would just send convicts there from Europe. Everyone thinks Australia was discovered by the Europeans. There were Aboriginals there before that. Australia did have a way of life before that, a human way of life. So don't make that mistake again. For starters, the Aboriginals actually lived in harmony with nature, something that the humans of today are incapable of doing. They, for example, they would actually hunt, fish in a lake or in a forest without completely decimating the population. They would hunt or fish until the population, the local wildlife population, were a certain size, and then they would stop. They would go somewhere else, so that the population, the wildlife population, had a chance to reproduce and to get back to its original numbers. So that's the first example. They don't have territories or states. They just had separate tribes that moved around, because to be able to have their food, their everything, they would have to move around regularly, but they would live in tribes that weren't enemies as such, but weren't exactly family. They wouldn't have cities or towns like we have today. They would have temporary villages that would be little natural huts that they would afterwards, after they leave to go and find new food, they would dismantle those huts. So Aboriginals really did have a very interesting way of life, because not only that, they didn't have schools, so they taught their life lessons through music. They would use their traditional instruments and their singing to teach younger generations their life lessons. So that is also not like us, because we do everything officially. We have to do paperwork and all that boring stuff that we could live without. With their music, they lived according to song lines, which are lines that they could see, which would tell them their destiny through music, but we can't see them. Only the Aboriginals can see those song lines. They used that way of life with those song lines until the British came along and put fences up to separate rich masters' states, rich European masters' states, one from the other. So the song lines were then cut. They weren't able to use them anymore. Their way of life, their way of life started dying down. So that's when it all started. All this new discovery. Another interesting fact is that Aboriginals don't tolerate alcohol. So when Europeans introduced them to alcohol, it turned them into the so-called drunks, dirty alcoholics that they are now. It So I did just call them bad names, but to show an example through what you know them as. But that is a big mistake, and please do not call them that, because they are honourable people. We could have learnt a lot from them had we have given them a chance. Had we have not destroyed their life, we could have learnt a lot of life lessons from them. We wouldn't be in such a global crisis as we are today. But we destroyed any chance of that when we destroyed their way of life. So they got introduced to alcohol, and it is because of us now that they are drunk, that they don't live lives like us. So when you see Aboriginals being drunk, always remember that's because of us. Generally we tolerate a few glasses before we get drunk, maybe even a bottle of alcohol. They don't tolerate any. They tolerate a few sips and then they get drunk. And it's our fault. Because much like the Asians actually, they do not tolerate alcohol, and we do. And now we have the nerve to call them dirty alcoholics. So please take that into account. I hope you've learned a lot about Aboriginals. Thank you for watching.